Hey guys, today I want to take a look at the popularity of Senator Kyrsten Sinema and why this is an issue for her. She is one of the most polarizing senators in the Senate. She was elected in 2018 to serve the state of Arizona and will be up for re-election in 2024, and this will be one of the closest watched races. And right now, she's the least popular Democrat in the state of Arizona, and that is a big issue for her. So before we get started, make sure you join my Discord server if you have not. The link to which is at the very top of the description below. We have a pretty cool mock government on there, so make sure you join that if you have not. So taking a look at the favorability of Kyrsten Sinema right now, this is among Arizona registered voters. So basically, out of every single person polled here, Kyrsten Sinema has basically a favorability rating of 39% if you add up the very and somewhat favorable. You have 21% that have no opinion of her, and you have 40% of people who disapprove of her. So this is basically a favorability rating of net -1. You have 39% approve while you have 40% disapprove. Now this is all right, but I mean, for a senator from Arizona, senators typically have higher approval ratings than the president does in states, and -1% in a state where she was able to win in 2018 by over 50% of the vote, I think really is pretty upsetting for her. And especially compare this number to Mark Kelly, who is her colleague now, also in the Senate. So for Kyrsten Sinema right now, she currently is doing pretty poorly among Democrats. Now, out of all registered voters, she's doing well, but if you look at just these numbers among Democrats, it's pretty surprising to see her doing so well in terms of approval. I mean, even at 39%, I think that's pretty high. Just looking at her approval among Democrats, if you look at all Democrats, she only has a 50% approval rating from voters of her own party. In her own party, 30% of her party do not like her, and then you have 20% who are unsure or never heard of her. And then for liberal Democrats, so these are the ones at the very left, progressives basically, they have an even less favorable view of her. This is essentially at 46% approve to 40% disapprove. But for the conservative and more moderate Democrats, those more in the middle, her approval is definitely much higher at 55%, and then only 20% disapprove. And more moderate and conservative Democrats have never heard of her. So for Kyrsten Sinema, her approval among Democrats, this is terrible. This is a terrible favorability rating among your own party. However, what she makes up for with this is her approval among Republicans, and I'll go over why this is an issue for her. But she is quite popular among Republicans. Among all Republicans, she currently has a staggering 33% approval rating, which is really pretty surprising. Among moderate and liberal Republicans, these are the Republicans that are more in the middle. She currently has a 40% approval rating among Republicans to 53% disapprove among the more moderate and liberal Republicans. And then the more conservative Republicans, so these are the true Republicans, the true conservatives at the very right, basically a 27% approval rating to a 59% disapproval rating. So she is essentially not approved of in any single demographic except for Democrats, basically. But her margin with Democrats really should be much, much larger. She's only at 50% approval among her own party, which is really pretty disappointing. Among Republicans, she's surprisingly popular, which is really what boosts her approval rating, because with 50% of Democrats, your approval is not going to be very high. It's these Republicans that make up for that approval rating that she does not have from Democrats. Now, for Mark Kelly, so Mark Kelly is the other senator in Arizona. He just won his race in 2020. It was a special election, so he'll be up in 2022. And I think Democrats should be very happy that it's Mark Kelly that's up for re-election in 2022 and not Kyrsten Sinema. Kyrsten Sinema, I mean, has a much smaller chance at winning re-election. Now, they both face the same opponent, Martha McSally, and I'll go over their races in just a few moments here, but Mark Kelly won 51.2% of the vote. That's the most for a Democrat in a very, very long time. And then looking at the favorability of Mark Kelly, he currently has, at this moment in time, a 49% net approval rating. So 49%, compare this to Kyrsten Sinema here at 39%. So Mark Kelly's approval rating in the state is already 10% higher, and he currently does have a 38% disapproval rating, which is not that bad. That makes up for a net 11% approval rating, which is better than Kyrsten Sinema's. But among Democrats, I mean, this is much, much better. 80% of Democrats approve of Mark Kelly, while just 11% of Democrats do not approve. Out of the independents here, a majority of independents, or almost a majority, at 49% of independents approve, while a small minority of independents disapprove. But among Republicans, Mark Kelly is definitely less popular among Republicans because he is more liberal, but he's definitely much less popular among Republicans than Kyrsten Sinema, who has, a 33% approval rating among Republicans. So basically, Mark Kelly, although he's less popular among Republicans, he is much, much more popular among Democrats and independents, and this really helps boost his approval rating. And among the Republicans still, they may favor Kyrsten Sinema, they may view her positively, but that does not mean they're going to vote for her. You can view a lot of people positively, and Republicans, they would still want to vote for a Republican. Republicans are still more conservative than Democrats. Republicans will still vote more conservatively than Kyrsten Sinema in the Senate. So Kyrsten Sinema, although a Democrat, is really very conservative. She likes to say that she does her own thing like John McCain did, but really, a lot of progressives are not seeing it that way, and that's kind of the base that she does need. She is against removing the filibuster, which Joe Manchin is as well, and quite a few other Democrats. She is also against the $15 minimum wage, which Joe Manchin and I believe 6 other Democrats are also opposed to, which is something that definitely they opposed because they wanted more discussion on it, and that's something that definitely made the progressive wing, especially in Arizona, very upset, when they voted for her in 2018. So in 2018, Kyrsten Sinema defeated Martha McSally by a margin of 2.4%. This is actually a little bit of an upset victory because the polls had actually overpolled Martha McSally. So looking at the polls for the 2018 Senate race between Kyrsten Sinema and Martha McSally, Kyrsten Sinema was actually barely leading over Martha McSally. There were very many polls from Harris X as well showing that Martha McSally was leading by 5 and 6 points. The final poll from Trafalgar Group showed McSally up by 2%. The final Harris X poll showed Sinema up by 5. So the polls are really very, very back and forth, but definitely Kyrsten Sinema was not doing as well as, a 2.4% margin over Martha McSally. Martha McSally really did have a little bit of an advantage just looking at the polls. However, Kyrsten Sinema was able to defeat Martha McSally. So Martha McSally was a former representative. Both of them were former representatives at this point. And then after 2012, Jeff Flake decided to retire in 2018, and so Martha McSally won the Republican nomination, Kyrsten Sinema the Democratic nomination. And it was a pretty tough race for both of them, but Kyrsten Sinema did end up on top, so she became the first Democratic senator from the state in a pretty long time. And then for Arizona, Martha McSally ran again. So Martha McSally at this point, she was the incumbent senator. So after she lost in 2018, in 2019, basically, of course, you had the passing away of John McCain. And after John McCain passed away, Martha McSally was appointed by the governor to fill the seat, the vacancy left by John McCain. And so she became the incumbent. So she was in the Senate serving with Kyrsten Sinema. And definitely, she basically had all the chances she could have had given to her by the Republican Party, but she failed in 2020. She won an even smaller percentage of the vote. She won 40. I don't know. She won a larger percentage, I believe. She did win a larger percentage. She basically lost by the same margin of 2.4%. Once again, as you can see, in 2018, it was the same margin, 2.4%. Mark Kelly actually did pretty poorly, in my opinion. I really did expect him to do quite a bit better than Kyrsten Sinema did in 2018. But for Mark Kelly, who was still able to win. He was essentially the presumptive nominee for the Democrats for a while, because if you do look at the polls between Mark Kelly and Martha McSally for 2020, Mark Kelly was leading by much larger margins in the polls. It was pretty much expected for a very long time that he was going to win this race. Martha McSally had not led in polls since October, mid-October, really. Martha McSally was below in basically every single poll towards the end, and definitely this was a victory that was very expected for Mark Kelly. But for Kyrsten Sinema here, the reason why she's so unpopular among Democrats is, just looking at her, voting history, basically this was when Donald Trump was president. So the 117th Congress is essentially the couple of weeks between when they were inaugurated on the 5th of January for the Senate, when Kyrsten Sinema was inaugurated once again, or they did the oath, and then basically until Donald Trump left office on January 20th. So that's basically why there's only 2 bills for the 117th Congress. There's no Biden score or anything yet, so that's why it's so short. But really, she was in the Senate for the 116th Congress, which was from 2019 to 2020, and then she was in there for the 115th just for a couple of days, I believe, if you look, or this was 2017, 2018. This was her as a representative. So this was not her as a senator. So this was her when she was in the House of Representatives. And so how she voted here was essentially she voted 62.6% with Donald Trump when she was a House member, and then when she joined the Senate, she voted with Donald Trump 26.2% of the time. So this is basically whether or not Trump supported these bills. Basically, if you supported, basically that's a vote with Trump, and if you vote yes on a bill that Trump does not support, that is not agreeing with Donald Trump. And so her Trump score on average was 50.4% during the Trump presidency. Her predicted score based off of Trump's margin here and the fact that she is a Democrat was expected to be 39.8%. So she definitely voted with Donald Trump a lot more than expected. Trump won the state in 2016 by 3.5%. In 2016. It was a pretty weak victory for Donald Trump. I'm considering that in 2012, Mitt Romney won the state by 9.1%, and then 2008, John McCain won it by 8.5%. Just a little bit back, you can see in 2000, this was 6.3%, and 2004, 10%. So it was around that 5 to 10% range for Republicans for a while. This state used to be very, very red. If you look back in 1988, Bush won it by 21%. This state used to be a GOP stronghold like Virginia, but recently it has moved to the left by quite a bit, and in 2020, Joe Biden flipped it by 0.3%. On the Senate level, you can see the same thing here. In 2018, Sinema won it by 2.3%, and 2020, Mark Kelly won it by 2.3%. So they do the margins a little bit different. It's around 2.3, 2.4% for both of them. So definitely, Kyrsten Sinema's popularity is going to be an issue for her because Martha McSally was a weak candidate. She lost twice against Mark Kelly and Kyrsten Sinema. Now, I will say that Kyrsten Sinema and Mark Kelly, they were both pretty strong candidates, especially Mark Kelly, who basically won the nomination very, very early on. But for Kyrsten Sinema, I think she was definitely a strong candidate as well when she was running. But for Martha McSally, she was definitely not a strong candidate in any way. She really pandered towards the Trump voters, and since Trump lost, definitely there were a little bit more Biden voters and more people who were against Trump than for Trump in the state of Arizona after 4 years and even 2 years for Kyrsten Sinema here. So for 2024, this is going to be an issue for her and the Democratic Party. She's definitely somebody that does not like being told what to do, and so she basically just votes however she wants, and she really does not like being lobbied or told how to vote. But as for Kyrsten Sinema, she's definitely a vulnerable senator in 2024. And another one that I want to take a look at is Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin, of course, is the other conservative Democrat in the Senate. Kyrsten Sinema, Joe Manchin are basically the two most powerful people in the Senate because they need the Democrats need their votes if they want to get anything passed. Joe Manchin, especially because Joe Manchin is more conservative than Kyrsten Sinema. So looking at the re-election campaign of Joe Manchin in 2018. So Joe Manchin was first elected in 2012. He was able to win 60.7% of the vote. Now, West Virginia is very red, but definitely it did not used to be as red. So looking at the presidential elections in West Virginia in 2012, Mitt Romney won it by 26%. Now, definitely Joe Manchin's victory here was a big surprise, 60.7%. And then Romney won 62% in the state. Now, Joe Manchin does have, a lot of ties to the state of West Virginia, so that definitely does help him. But in 2008, this state only went to John McCain by 13%. And then 2016, Donald Trump wins West Virginia by 42%. Now, in 2018, you saw many incumbent Democrats lose. You saw Claire McCaskill in Missouri. This was to say that Trump only won by 18%. Claire McCaskill lost the state, even though she was running for her third term. And then I forgot who it was, but the senator from South Dakota also lost her seat. Heidi Heitkamp, she also lost her seat in 2018 after Trump won South Dakota by 30% in 2016. If you look at the 2018 Senate races, you see Claire McCaskill lost against Josh Hawley, and Heidi Heitkamp lost against I forgot what his first name was, but he lost against Kramer by 10% for Heidi Heitkamp. So, the incumbent Democrats, they still did do well because they were incumbents, but definitely not as well as Joe Manchin, who was able to actually win re-election in 2018, even though Trump won the state by a much larger margin in West Virginia than in Missouri and North Dakota. So, looking at the 2018 re-election campaign, this was definitely a campaign that Republicans thought they could flip after Trump's huge victory there. They really thought that they could, unseat a incumbent Democrat in a state in which Trump was very, very popular in. But Joe Manchin definitely, even though he's a Democrat, he's very well known in the state. He's also pretty popular there considering he's a Democrat. And, definitely a lot of people did want him out. But the Republicans, they basically lost hope towards the end. I mean, just looking at the polls here, this is for 2020. But for 2018, Joe Manchin was leading by huge margins in the polls over Patrick Morrisey, even though Patrick Morrisey was the Republican in the race. So this was definitely one of the most watched races, and one that Joe Manchin was able to pull off a pretty surprising and honestly a pretty strong victory for in West Virginia. But 2024, it may be a little bit different. But politics is getting more and more polarizing just by the day, and for Joe Manchin to win re-election, there's definitely a lot of things that Joe Manchin has supported with the Democrats, but there's definitely a lot of things that, Republicans have wanted. I mean, like the stimulus checks. If Joe Manchin did not vote for that, that would not have happened. And that's something that even though Republicans on the Senate were against, no Republican senator voted for stimulus checks, the extra $1,600, I believe, or the extra, I believe it was $1,600, but whatever amount it was in February or March. But for Joe Manchin, he voted for that, and that was something that Republicans, the people of the Republican Party, they did want that. And looking at the Trump score of Joe Manchin, it's 50.4%, so exactly the same as Kyrsten Sinema's, but he was a senator, and so basically he was in the Senate this whole time, which does make it a little bit different. He voted for, he voted with Trump 60% of the time when he was in the Senate. For Kyrsten Sinema, the 115th Congress, she was only in the House of Representatives, which is a little bit different. Her votes are a lot less high profile than senators. And then for Joe Manchin, it was expected that he was going to vote basically just based on the math. Because of how strong Trump's margin here was, it was expected that he would vote for, with Donald Trump 89% of the time. But, he's a Democrat. That just wasn't going to happen. He did vote with Trump more than he voted against him. So, definitely this makes, the people in West Virginia happy. But really, Joe Manchin, he's been able to capture, of course, the Democratic vote there. But he also does need the Republicans, and he's been able to get quite a few Republicans on his side. But 2024, I think, will definitely be very, very tough for Joe Manchin as well as Kyrsten Sinema. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure you like it down below if you enjoyed it. Comment down below whether or not you think Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin can survive the 2024 re-election campaigns if they do run. Kyrsten Sinema, I think, is much more likely. Joe Manchin, he may retire because of his chances of losing, but if they were to run, what do you think they would win? And then make sure you join my Discord server if you have not. Link at the very top of the description below. Subscribe to my channel if you have not. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.